But specific laws, like circumcision, are very difficult for Gentiles to accept. Demanding the Gentiles eat certain foods or wear certain clothes is not important in my opinion. It's only important that they understand and accept Jesus and the teaching of Jesus.
But didn't Jesus teach the law?
He did.
Everybody, this is Jason. How are you doing? So today I'm gonna kind of discuss a very strange commandment of Paul regarding the head coverings in 1 Corinthians. This is kind of a little rabbit trail that I went down a while back. I'd actually heard rumors about what Paul was getting at, but when I actually looked into it, yeah, this is verified that this is probably what Greek thought was at the time. And I'm going to warn you, this might not be suitable for children. It's got some adult themes in it, so earmuffs. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the verse. I'll go a little bit through the Torah, what it says, and then we'll kind of jump to the scholarly view of what's going on here in this verse. So let's go ahead and start. On covering the head in worship. I praise you for remembering me in everything and for holding to the traditions just as I pass them on to you. But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut off or her head shaved, then she should cover her head. And I'll repeat this. So if a woman doesn't cover her head, she might as well shave her head. But if it's a disgrace for her to shave her head, then she should cover her head. That's not circular logic at all, if you understand that. Oh, more power to you. A man ought not cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. It is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority over her own head, because of the angels. And don't even get me started on this. Yeah. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For as woman came from man, so also is born of woman. But everything comes from God. And this is another one of his word salad taglines that he uses all the time. It means nothing. It has nothing pertaining to the conversation at all. I think it just gives him validity or something. I have no idea. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not the very nature of things teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a disgrace to him? And we're going to get to the root of it right here. Does the very nature of things teach you? What's he talking about? The very nature of things. So this is supposed to be some sort of naturalistic discussion that nature dictates that a man who having long hair is a disgrace to him. This should already make no sense to anybody. Like, what are you talking about, Paul? But that if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for long hair is given to her as a covering. If anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. Okay, so now we have this input from Paul. I'm not exactly sure where he's getting it from, but I've heard arguments to say that it has to do with the temple prostitutes, that the male prostitutes in Greece would cover their hair, and the women prostitutes would shave their head. Maybe. I don't know how many temple prostitutes are praying to the Most High. And I also don't know what that has to do with men with long hair, or that women with shaved. Okay, well maybe women with shaved heads should cover their hair. I don't know. The whole line of thinking doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But maybe he's getting it from the Torah. You think? And I would say where? Nowhere from Genesis to Deuteronomy is there a commandment saying how a woman should dress or cover her hair or anything about modesty. It's completely silent. The only thing I've found in the Torah really regarding head coverings or anything of the sort is in Genesis 24:65 regarding Eliezer when he's talking to Rebekah when he's sent from Abraham to find a wife for his son. So right here it's saying, and she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself. Now, some might go, "Oh, well, see, Paul was right. She covered herself." And I would say, what? She didn't have the covering on. She was talking to Eliezer until Isaac came. So, was it a tradition that women even covered themselves back in the days of Isaac? I don't know, but she doesn't seem to have it on there. She puts it on when she sees her future husband. This could relate to our current customs of a woman when she gets married will have a veil over her face, and as soon as the marriage is complete, he removes the veil. But this has nothing to do with women praying with their head covered. So my second portion is men having long hair and it being a disgrace to them. And we're supposed to know this because nature tells us this, right? Because in nature, everyone's born with a razor and cuts their own hair. So we're again going to go to the Torah and we're going to see what the Torah says about long hair. Number 6:5. During the entire period of their Nazirite vow, no razor may be used on their head. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. So this is regarding a specific instance where a man is taking the Nazirite vow, right? And his hair is required to grow long. So I'm wondering where the disgrace is in this. So if you kind of sit back and think about any of the Jews at the time who had long hair, it was generally because they had the Nazirite vow. And you got to realize that most of the churches that Paul was speaking to were mostly Jews. So if a Jew had long hair, it was likely because he had a Nazirite vow. But anyway, this is just one instance. We'll continue on to 1 Samuel 1:11. Okay, so this is about Samuel's mother making a vow to the Most High that he would give her a son, and that she would give him basically to the temple in the service of Yah. Right? And she made a vow saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." Okay, so this is another instance of the Nazirite vow. Basically, it's a lifelong one. So I would ask you, this is Samuel, the prophet of Israel, the one who anoints David and Saul, the first kings of Israel. Is this man a disgrace? Obviously not. Continuing. We'll go to Judges 13:5. So this is a verse about Samson's mother. She just got visited by an angel who's going to tell her that she is pregnant and will have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So yet again, lifelong long hair haver. I would ask you, is this man a disgrace because of his long hair? In fact, I would argue he was only disgraced when he cut his hair short. And it wasn't until he grew his hair back that he was able to destroy the building, toppling the pillars and destroying all the Philistines, renewing his Nazirite vow. So was this man a disgrace? Absolutely not. So what is Paul talking about here? And what is the very nature of things that teaches us that if he has long hair, it's a disgrace? We'll get to this. Okay, so a little bit about Paul. What we know, he was born in Tarsus, or he is from Tarsus. Tarsus is a Greek-speaking province in Turkey, a Roman province. We know that the Ebionites called him a Greek. We know that he quoted often from the Septuagint, like a lot of the time. And that's where he gets a lot of his wacky doctrines, is actually from the poorly translated Septuagint. And I would ask you why? Because the LXX is written in Greek, which tells me that he probably speaks and writes fluently in Greek because that's his native language. I highly doubt that he read and wrote Hebrew very well. He probably could speak it very well. For living in the region, you'd kind of have to. But the whole idea that he was some Torah scholar, I highly doubt that. A lot of the verses that he quotes, for a student of Gamaliel, he doesn't know a lot of the Hebrew scriptures. He knows a lot of the Septuagint. Okay, so that tells me that's mainly what he reads. Anyway, so all that said, Paul is a Greek by nature. He might have had his grandpa's cousin's brother, sister, might have been a Benjamite. I don't know. None of us know any of that, but for the most part, the guy was entrenched in Greek thought. It's how he grew up. So that's just kind of a little picture into his mind. That said, now we can kind of go to the scholarly look on what the thoughts were on men with long hair and women covering their heads and their hair in the old times. Okay, so this is the Journal of Biblical Literature, volume 123 from 2004. I actually selected this to show you guys because I've looked at quite a few of these, and this was probably the most scholarly one. It's got a lot of references, and I'm actually going to leave the link in the description so you can look it over yourself. I find it completely fascinating, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to take a few excerpts, and you can decide for yourself. Okay. So we're going to go down here to Paul's argument from nature for the veil in 1 Corinthians 11:3 through 15. A testicle instead of a head covering. This is where it's going to start getting weird, guys. So Paul's notorious argument in 1 Corinthians 11:2 through 16 for the veiling of women in public worship is frequently criticized for being logically convoluted and confused. Elizabeth Schussler-Fiorenza expresses the scholarly assessment of Paul's argument. We are no longer able to decide with certainty which behavior Paul criticizes and which custom he means to introduce in 1 Corinthians 11:2 through 16. Traditionally, exegetes have conjectured that Paul was insisting that the pneumatic woman leaders wear the veil according to Jewish custom. Yet verse 15 maintains that women have their hair instead of a head covering. That is parabulian, I believe. And thus militates against such interpretation in a very convoluted argument which can no longer be unraveled completely. Paul adduces several points for this custom or hair fashion. Okay, and I'm going to point out here exactly what they're talking about. But that if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for long hair is given to her as a covering. Okay, but it's also saying, for if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have her hair cut off. So, which one is it? Why would she have her hair cut off if she doesn't cover her head? But here in 15, but if the woman has long hair, it is given to her as a covering. So is her hair covering, or should she cover her hair? This is kind of the predicament that they're talking about in JBL. Okay. So similarly, Victor Paul furnished comments. There is no doubt that Paul also means to provide a theological basis for his instructions about hairstyle of women who pray or prophesy. But in this case, his argument is obscure. At least to modern interpreters, and it may well have seemed unsatisfactory even to the apostle himself. At any rate, in the end, he abandons his argument altogether by suggesting that if his directives are not followed, the Corinthians will be departing from the convention that obtains in other congregations. Describing Paul's argument as bewilderingly difficult, Marion L. Sword states one hopes that the Corinthians had an easier time following Paul's logic than do modern readers. I agree. One may hope, but the scholarly assessment is that neither the Corinthians nor possibly even Paul himself completely comprehended this argument for the veiling of women. While many features of this argument in 1 Corinthians 11:2-16 require explanation, the argument from nature in verses 13 through 15 is particularly problematic. The rationale for the natural shame of a man with long hair is obscure. Yes. Especially problematic is the statement that a woman's long hair is given to her instead of a covering. In verse 15b, as traditionally understood, this statement nullifies the previous argument that a woman should wear a covering, since her long hair apparently serves that purpose. A satisfactory explanation of this argument from nature would resolve the apparent contradiction and enable this argument to support Paul's contention that women should wear the veil in public worship. The term parabulion in verse 15b provides the key for explaining this argument from nature. This portion of the verse is usually translated, "For her hair is given to her instead of a covering," parabulion. In an influential article, Athoniel Moda argues that parabulion here means some kind of head covering. Paul Ellingworth and Howard Hatton explain, the word translated covering is a general word for a garment, possibly one used as an outer covering, although it does not specify any particular piece of clothing. There seems to be an obvious relation between this verse and the discussion in verses 4 and 5 about a covering for the head. Even though these scholars have identified the dominant semantic domain of this word, the term parabulion has a much broader semantic range. Since parabulion is contrasted with hair, which is part of the body, the physiological semantic domain of parabulion in 1 Corinthians 11:15b becomes particularly relevant. Euripides uses parabulion in reference to the body part. He casts Hercules as complaining, "After I received my bags of flesh, which are the outward signs of puberty, I received labors about which I shall undertake to say what is necessary." This continues on. I'm not going to continue reading that, but we're going to skip down here to this part. You can go back and read the whole rest of the article yourself if you want. Again, I'm going to leave the link in the description. I suggest you go look at it. It's great. He's actually pulling a lot of Greek thought from Aristotle, Hippocrates, etc. So, anyway, continuing. Ancient medical conceptions confirm this association. Hippocratic authors hold that hair is hollow and grows primarily from either male or female reproductive fluid or semen flowing into it and congealing. And this is where it gets really weird, guys. Since hollow body parts create a vacuum and attract fluid, hair attracts semen. Appropriately, the term cum, I believe, refers not only to hair, but also to the arms or suckers of the cuttlefish. Hair grows most prolifically from the head because the brain is the place where the semen is produced, or at least stored. There's Hippocrates. Hair grows only on the head of prepubescent humans because semen is stored in the brain and the channels of the body have not yet become large enough for reproductive fluid to travel throughout the body. At puberty, secondary hair growth in the pubic area marks the movement of reproductive fluid from the brain to the rest of the body. Women have less body hair, not only because they have less semen, but also because their colder bodies do not froth the semen throughout their bodies, but reduce semen evaporation at the ends of their hair. And we're almost done with this, I promise. According to these medical authors, men have more hair because they have more semen, and their hotter bodies froth the semen more readily throughout their whole bodies. The nature of man is to release or eject the semen. During intercourse, semen has to fill all the hollow hairs on its way from the male brain to the genital area. Thus, men have hair growth on their face, chest, and stomach. A man with hair on his back reverses the usual position of intercourse. A man with long hair retains much or all of his semen, and his long hollow hair draws the semen toward his head area, but away from his genital area, where it should be ejected. Therefore, 1 Corinthians 11:14 correctly states that it is a shame for a man to have long hair, since the male nature is to eject rather than retain semen. And I'm just going to stop it right there. Paul's entire understanding is that hair absorbs semen. This is a guy who claims to get downloads from the Messiah, claims to get all this wisdom and knowledge and be imbued with the Holy Spirit, and this entire bunch of verses is a bunch of Greek nonsense. Paul is relying on his own understanding, not some deep understanding of God. I just thought I would share this. I hope somebody got a chuckle out of it, because this is so stupid. Anyway, I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Shabbat Shalom.